Give it up one more time for Zach Galligan.
Hello, everybody. Let's just check and make sure this works. Great.
Here we
cool.
are. Thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to have you here at Monopoly Events. How have you been enjoying the Comic-Con so far?
It's been great so far. A little chilly in there, but now that people are showing up and it's filling up with the body temperature and warming up, and it's been great. The vibe in the room is really good. Everybody seems really happy and excited to be here, as am I.
Yes. You guys excited to be here? Yes, indeed. First time ever in Northern Ireland for Monopoly Events. Have you gotten to see much of the UK?
Well, I've been all over the UK. This is only my second time in Northern Ireland, so I spent the day walking around Belfast yesterday, went to the Titanic Museum.
Yay.
Absolutely spectacular, and walked along the Galligan and just enjoyed the town and the people, the restaurants and everything. It's a very impressive city, so I've really been enjoying myself.
Good. And Belfast is a great place to enjoy yourself because you guys know how to party, let's face it.
Lisburn's good too, though.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on Lisburn.
So glad you got to see a bit of the city so far. But as far as the Comic-Con, we have so many great genres represented here, different movies that span different generations. Have you had fun meeting all of the rest of the celebrities here?
One of the really nice things about doing these conventions is you meet all sorts of different people who do all sorts of different things. Yeah. And I'm right next to James Murray of Impractical Jokers, which I watch too. And it's funny because he's a huge Gremlins fan as well. So it's weird. You watch TV and it's like, oh, I love that show. And then he's like, I love Gremlins. And then you meet each other and suddenly you're friends. It's very strange, but it's fun too. Are you secretly hoping that he doesn't prank you today? Because that did cross my mind. I'd rather just be on an episode of the show, if I was honest. I'd rather just do an episode of Impractical Jokers and join in and do some of the pranks with them. That would be such a cool crossover. It would be kind of fun. Throw Gizmo in there too. You want to be on Impractical Jokers? Aww. Yes. Give it up for Gizmo, everybody. So he wants to be on. Yes. The legend that is Gizmo. One more question from me, and then we have our buddy Dave over here. Give it up for Dave. Hey, Dave. He's got the microphone, so he will be running around getting your questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and Dave will come to you. But another quick question from me. Talking about all of the different TV shows and movies that are represented here, what are you currently watching? What are you into? Let's see. What do I currently watch? I watch, all of the Narcos and Narcos Mexico. Yeah. I watch that. I'm a big Formula One guy, which is kind of surprising for an American. So I watched that, Drive to Survive or something like that. That show's great too. And that's about the two that come right to the top of my head. There's that new show that just came on, the new Game of Thrones one. Was it House of the Dragon? Mm-hmm. You're going to catch up on that too. Maybe I'll watch that on the plane on the way home. There's a lot of good TV out there right now. There is a lot of good TV, yeah. Yeah, but it's a lot to catch up with, that's for sure. We've got a question right here on the left. Oh.
How did you get the part?
How did I get the part?
Yes.
Well, actually, it was a fairly straightforward process, but as an actor, it's a process we kind of call jumping through a lot of hoops. And the question is, how many times do they make you audition? So I had to audition 3 times for Gremlins. First for the casting director, which is whoa. Don't know what's going on over there, but it's pretty crazy.
There's professional wrestling going on, and I knew it was going to be very loud.
Professional wrestling.
Yes.
Could you keep it down over there, please? Trying to have a Q&A. Thank you. Thank you very much. A few less body slams, and just wait till I'm done answering the question. So I did one audition for the casting director, which is kind of like a pre-screening kind of a thing. And then I did one for the producer, Mike Fennell. He was the actual producer. Steven Spielberg's the executive producer, which is kind of a different thing. The executive producer is more like the person who oversees the whole project instead of who makes the movie. Goodness. And the last one was for the director, Joe Dante. So, and at the last one, they paired me, luckily, with Phoebe Cates, who I had a massive crush on at the time and who I'd auditioned with for other projects, I'd probably auditioned for maybe 2 or 3 other things with her and had not gotten them. But I was pretty enamored with Phoebe Cates since she was a really, really nice person and insanely great looking in person as well. And so I auditioned with her and we just had really good chemistry. And apparently during the audition at the very end, the director went to call cut, but he didn't actually call cut. So they do that sometimes to see what the actors will do when the scene is over. And so I didn't know what to do, so I put my head on Phoebe's shoulder, and I just looked at the camera and I kind of sighed. I kind of went like, like I was in love with her. And apparently Spielberg saw that and he was like, look, he's in love with her already. I don't need to see anybody else. So that's how I got that. Sometimes it's what you do when you're not doing the scene that gets you the part, as opposed to actually your actual audition. Those look good, by the way, in the front row. Yummy. Yeah.
Well, speaking of acting, we have a lot of aspiring acting or acting students or wannabe actors in that crowd. Do you have any advice for someone wanting to get into acting? You've had a great career, you know.
Okay,
Gremlins
so here's
aside.
my advice for you if you want to be an actor. Don't. Or, if you want to be an actor, make sure it's literally a life or death thing for you. If your feeling is like, I would die if I'm not an actor, I might as well not be alive unless I can be an actor, then you should be an actor. But if you're kind of like, it's something I'm thinking of dipping my toe into the pool and seeing how it is, if you're kind of half and half about it, do not do it. Because it's brutal on your ego, and it's full of rejection and disappointment, and 95% of the people don't make it. And more than anything else, you have to be mentally strong. You have to be very mentally strong, and you have to be able to put up with rejection, and you have to be able to be told no and have it be okay. Like I taught acting for 10 years at NYU in New York City, New York University, and one of the things I tell my students that your attitude has to be like, good Lord. Is everybody okay over there? You all right there in the wrestling world? Okay. The one thing you have to do is have this kind of an attitude, okay? No, okay, no, okay, no, all right, no, I don't get this one either, no. And you have to say, be told no 50, 60, 70 times and be okay with it. So when finally the person goes, no, okay, yes, thank you so much. I love you. And then you go back and maybe you'll get 100 more no's. Yeah. But you have to be okay with that because that's really literally the nature of the business. So if you can deal with rejection, you know, then being persistent. I think persistence it's 90% persistence. What do they say? It's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. So you really just have to put your nose to the grindstone and just be like a rhinoceros, bashing your head against the door, and eventually the door will give way and you'll break through. It takes a lot of patience.
That's great advice. I appreciate that very much. Oh, we've got a question here on the left.
What's your favorite thing about Gizmo?
What's my favorite thing about Gizmo? Everything. Aww. Everything that there is to be. Well, he's cuddly. And probably my favorite thing about him is that he's mine. You know, that I own him. And this is a fake Gizmo. The real Gizmo's at home in my closet. He doesn't travel well. He likes it where it's nice and dark and dry. And so I get to keep the real one. And so it's cool. I've had him for 37 years now. And you saw him in the Mountain Dew commercial. I don't know if you saw the Mountain Dew Zero commercial that I did. He's got a little gray in his whiskers now. But we're buddies. We've grown old together. It's great.
He's aging beautifully.
He is aging beautifully.
God bless him. We've got a question over here on the right.
Have you ever been asked to do another Gremlins movie? And if you were, would you consider it?
Well, they better ask me, or else we're going to have some trouble. The fights are going to break out. I'll have to engage in fisticuffs and various things like that. But actually, there hasn't been a lot of press about it yet. It's certainly not over here. But there's a 10-part animated series on HBO Max next year called Gremlins: Secrets of the Mogwai, and it's a prequel, and it follows Gizmo in China, in Shanghai in the 1920s, when he's just a wee little lad. And I might as well use the lingo since I'm over here in Northern Ireland. And it tells you about the origin of Gizmo and how he finds the old Chinese man that he hooks up with in the first one. He meets him when he's 10 years old in China, and they're buddies. And apparently, I'm not allowed to tell you. I mean, I do a voice. I'm allowed to tell you that I do a voice, not Billy, obviously, because how could Billy be alive in 1920s China? But I do a voice in the series. And the series is very cool, but what I can tell you is we do find out that there's, in fact, a fourth rule of Mogwais. So they expand on the mythology, and Gizmo comes up against all kinds of Chinese mythological monsters and stuff like that. And it's really quite clever and very well done. So you'll see that next year on HBO Max or the Cartoon Network, depending on which one you get.
Very cool. That's exciting. Got a question over here on the right.
Hi. Did you have any idea when you were doing the part that it was going to be so culturally massive in 30 odd years on, you'd still be known and answering questions about what you were doing when you played Billy?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll answer it in two parts. I knew at the time that the movie was going to come out and be a big hit because of Spielberg's association with it. But if you had told me that nearly 4 decades later, I would be in huge venues like this all around the world, because I go to places like this, and I go to Australia and Japan and Middle East and Europe and pretty soon South America, literally all over the world. If you had told me that 4 decades later it would be just as big as it was then, I would have told you were out of your mind. But I think the real secret to that is that it kind of turned into a Christmas movie. Because, when it came out in the States, it came out in June. It was a big summer blockbuster. And then over the years, people forgot when it came out. And just, it got shown on TV and HBO and whatever around Christmas time. And the amount of attention that Gizmo gets and that I get around December 1st to New Year's it's absolutely mental what happens. It's madness. My phone just blows up, and the Twitter engagement, the Instagram engagement, and all of the social media stuff. And I do a lot of Christmas screenings. In London a few years ago, I did a whole series of Gremlins Christmas screenings at the Prince Charles Cinema in London. And so it's just a fun, amazing, global thing that I never expected to become as big as it is. Never.
Great question. Got a question over here on the left.
Hello, how are you? When it comes to shooting the scenes with Gremlins with the practical effects of the animatronics, of
Sure.
the actual creatures themselves, what was that like from an acting standpoint, especially in the scenes where they were like skittering unseen? Did that help kind of immerse you in it?
Well, the acting profession is such a strange profession to begin with. And one of the ways I always answer this question, because it's a very popular question, is that it's really not that much different pretending that this animatronic thing is real than it is that pretending an actress that you just met 10 minutes ago is your wife. And you got to get your togs off and get in bed and kiss her. And you just met her. You may not even remember her last name, and suddenly you're supposed to be in love with her and do kissing scenes with someone who you just met. That's stranger than pretending a cute little thing is your pet. You know what I mean? So the whole acting business in general is very, very peculiar and takes a lot of leaps of imagination. But as far as working with the practical effects, the first one was way more difficult than the second one, than Gremlins 2. And that's because they learned a lot of things from the first one about what not to do. So they would go out of their way in the second one to do things like put him in the toolbox so I could carry the toolbox instead of like carrying him. And I would have conversations with him in the toolbox instead of him in my hands. Because if I had a conversation with him in my hands, I had to have all the cables from the animatronics going down, taped to my body, going down my body, down to my leg, and then they would cut a hole in my sock, and all the cables would go across this stage, and I'd have, 12 or 13 different people. Each one would have a little joystick controlling a different part of the gizmo and watching it on a camera and whispering amongst themselves. And so we would turn the volume level up to a certain thing so that I would speak a little bit louder than usual, and they would talk a little bit quieter, and it wouldn't pick them up. But so a lot of time when I'm doing scenes, out of the corner of my ear, I can hear, 9 or 10 people over where like that light is going, move his thing to the left. Yes, more ears. Make his nose twitch a little bit. So I'm trying to do a scene, and I got 10 people talking over there. So it was challenging in terms of blocking things out, Like I can block all the wrestling out. I'm really just kind of joking around about it. But you're pretty used to that as an actor when you do things like, bye, ladies. Thanks for coming. Peace out. Have a good time. Can you give me a pretzel on your way back? Yeah? Okay. Cool. Thanks.
They're
Thanks,
getting
babe. When you shoot scenes on the streets of Manhattan, there are tons of distractions and sirens and everything like that. You just learn to block everything out and try and be as focused as you possibly can.
Question from me before we get back to the audience. I'd love to talk to you about the fan interaction, how that's been, and what is it like with the little ones? Because you're dealing with little kids watching the movie. Me as a child, Gremlins terrified me. I later loved it, but it was really scary for me as a kid.
Well, Warner Brothers is putting a new fund up for psychological distress caused by Gremlins. So if you ever had any trauma when you were 6 or 7 or 8 watching it, you can go and get your psychiatrist bills refunded on the website.
Yay.
I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
Oh.
I'm joking, but I've had a lot of people coming up to me and going, "That movie terrified me when I was a kid. I can't believe you did that to me."
It was scary.
And I'm like, "Hey, man, I just do the movie. I don't do the advertising." And I think a real issue with it was that the advertising was very deceptive in that it's like, "Oh, look, it's a cute thing in a box on the poster. You're going to have a wonderful time. It's going to be just like E.T." And the first half is like E.T. And then the next half is like a descent into hell with like lizards from hell coming and murdering people. And you're like, wait, I didn't sign up for this.
More Gizmo, please.
Yeah, and Joe Dante used to call the movie Gremlins or It's a Wonderful Lizard of Oz from Hell. That's what he used to call
The
it.
working title, huh?
So yeah, it's got the magical like, hey everybody, it's like I'm Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life at the beginning. Hi movie house, hi everybody, running through the town square and oh isn't it cute, and then we will kill you.
Yeah. I feel very validated that I'm not the only one that was scared. I was also scared of Fraggle Rock though. I was a weird kid.
Yeah, but Mrs. Deagle essentially is the Wicked Witch, right? All the way down to her red shoes when she gets jettisoned out of the window. Spoiler, Mrs. Deagle goes through the window. But the last shot of her, she's wearing red shoes. That's on purpose to, do the throwback to the Wicked Witch of the West. Because, and Polly Holliday is trying to be very Margaret Hamilton-ish Wicked Witch of the West in the movie, deliberately just to sort of tip the cap to the Wizard of Oz.
Little wink, yes. We got a question over here on the right.
Hello again, Zach. Which one of the Gremlins movies is your favorite?
Well, Gavin and I had a nice chat back at my table. Sorry, I know his name. Well, Gavin, I would say the first one is definitely my favorite. Gremlins 2 is a very strange movie. And I can say that even though I'm in it. Even when we were doing it, I was like, what's going on? Because it's actually one of the only sequels that actively makes fun of and ridicules the first movie. And I don't think I've ever seen a sequel that makes fun of like you see Top Gun Maverick, and it's very sort of almost reverential towards the first one. We're like, we're bringing Danger Zone back because it was part of the first one, and you can't have Top Gun 2 without the theme song from Top Gun 1. And meanwhile, Gremlins 2 is just like, Gremlins 1 was terrible. Gremlins 1 made no sense. The rules made no sense. I'm like, what? What are you doing? So it's a very, very offbeat movie that actively makes fun of the predecessor. So very, very meta, very modernist, and very, very groundbreaking. It still hasn't really been anything quite like it.
I'll say so. We have time for just a few more questions. Just raise your hand, and Dave will come to you if any questions. Oh, couple behind you there, Dave. Yeah. Oh, we have a Jedi. Yes. He just saluted. Thank you.
Hi, guys. With reboots being the big thing at the moment, do you think there will be a reboot of Gremlins? And furthermore, if the price is right, would you come back for it?
Well, the price better be right, and then I'll come back for it. But considering what they gave me for the Mountain Dew commercial, I think everything will be just Jim Dandy. So I wouldn't really worry too much about that. But as far, what was the first part of the question? The first part of the question was...
Is there going to be a reboot? They're rebooting a lot of the 80s. Yeah.
So I can actually answer that fairly definitively. Apparently, Chris Columbus owns a part of it. So they cannot make a reboot without his permission. And he said he will, as long as he's alive, he will never allow it to happen, because the first Gremlins is like, I think it's his first screenplay or second screenplay. It's certainly his first big smash hit, and very near and dear to his heart. So he just claims he will never allow it. So as long as, just pray for his health, because as long as he's around and ticking, you'll never see a reboot. Just like hopefully you'll never see a reboot of like Back to the Future or The Godfather. Certain movies should just be left alone. Just leave them alone. They're like tigers. Just leave it alone. Don't touch it, because it'll bite you.
It's a very sweet reason, though. He also directed Harry Potter, I believe, Chris Columbus.
He did. I think he directed the first two.
Maybe, I think the last one as well. Maybe, I don't know. But that's a very sweet reason to want to preserve it, because he cares about it so much.
Yeah.
A couple more questions for Zach. We saw a hand in the back there. Yep, thank you. And then he's going to get back to the autograph and photo area, so make sure you come and see him.
What's your thoughts on all, the merchandise and stuff? Like, do you buy it, or do you just not like it,
Well, it's a very, very strange feeling being on lunchboxes and baseball cards and T-shirts and things like that. The first few times someone walks by you and you're on a T-shirt, it's pretty strange. It's fun. It's cool. I actually have a little action figure, Billy Peltzer action figure that they made. I actually call it a Zaction figure. And that's cool too, because I grew up, when I was your age, I collected action figures, and now there's one of me. The only negative part about the merchandising is that when I first signed up to do Gremlins, there was a huge number of people that wanted to do the movie and do my part. And one of the conditions was, if you signed up to do Gremlins, you had to sign away all rights to the merchandise. So I literally have not made a single penny on any of the merchandise in the 38 years it's been out. And you know what? That's okay, because you make money in other ways. But it's amazing, because when the merchandise came out in 1984, it made $1 billion with a B. in 1984 money, which is probably now about maybe 3 to 3.25 billion with inflation. So it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But it's fun doing the merchandise, and I think the Funko Pops are great. And they keep coming up with more stuff. There's a company called NECA that puts out all these figures, and those are amazing. So I think it's fun, and the fans really seem to like it, and it gives me something to sign over at my table, which I expect to see you all over at my table as soon as the Q&A is over, at least just to say hi.
Yes, that was a verbal invitation from Zach himself. I did have a Gizmo toy as a kid, by the way. Totally had one. Similar
Did you
to
hear that?
Yeah.
She's like, I know you.
I know you. But speaking of merchandise and how cool that is to see yourself on a lunchbox per se, I'm sure people have come to you in cosplay as you. Has that happened?
It just started recently in the last 6 or 7 years. People come dressed as Billy, and some of them are really elaborate. They have the scratch from the claw. They managed to get that. And some people remember to get the bloody bandage on my hand. And of course, they try and get my puffy 1983 hairstyle, which I'll tell you something funny about that. My hair's always kind of been pretty much like this. And so when I got Gremlins, you got to remember, I'm 19. And when you're 19 and you're doing your first big movie, you don't really fight back against anything. You just kind of go, sure. Oh, yeah. Well, great. Whatever you want. You want to get along. You don't want to get fired. Like the kid who did Back to the Future and got fired on Back to the Future after 6 weeks. You don't want to be that guy. And got replaced by Michael J. Fox. Maybe people don't know that. Well, there's one guy out there that shot Back to the Future for 6 weeks and thought he was going to be in one of the biggest movies ever, and he got fired. So I just basically knew when you got on the set, be nice to everybody and just be grateful that you're there. So the hairstylist was a woman named Sherry Ruff. And Sherry was like, I'm going to try and do this. And she sprayed my hair with water, and she went shaka, 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 shaka. And my hair went poof. And I had this huge puffy hairstyle, which you can see in the movie. She was like, how's that? And I hated it. And I was like, it's great. I love it. Let's go with that. And so the whole time, I got this big puffy kind of prefigured an actor named Kirk Cameron who's in a show called Growing Pains. It's kind of a pre-Kirk Cameron puffy curly haired thing like that. And I didn't like it, but it's now part of early 80s legend.
It's iconic, and it's back in fashion. It was so puffy, in fact, that as you can see, we couldn't even fit it onto the screen.
Yeah.
We couldn't.
Yep, pretty much.
We tried it. It's iconic. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions for Zach. I saw a hand up right back here. Right down there. A maroon-colored shirt. Yep.
In the
Thank you.
burgundy hoodie.
Hi.
Hello.
Was there any favorite parts in the movie that you enjoyed most?
Any favorite parts? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Let's see. Other than kissing Phoebe Cates, yeah, what was cool? There's a scene where Stripe jumps into the swimming pool. And most people don't know how they did that effect of the swimming pool bubbling and stuff like that. And what they did was, it was really cool. We shot that at a place called the Warner Brothers Ranch, where they had this swimming pool. And they brought this enormous truck that was full of 10,000 gallons of liquid nitrogen. And they just put huge hoses. And when they said, we can only do this twice, because they were going to pump something like 5,000 per take. And so when they would do it, they would cue the liquid nitrogen guy, and he would hit this huge switch, and they'd pour all this liquid nitrogen into the swimming pool. And when it hit the water and the chlorine, it made this unbelievably violent chemical reaction. And so when the pool is bubbling, the entire ground is shaking like an earthquake. And it was the first time it happened, because I think we only did it once or twice. I think we maybe did it twice. First time it happens, you're like, what's going on here? The whole ground is shaking and everything like that from them pumping the liquid nitrogen into the pool. So that's a real old school special effect. And that was, when you're 19, you're like, this is awesome. You know, you just thought it was the coolest thing, being on this movie and like, we're blowing up this theater and we're pumping liquid nitrogen into the pool. And I got all these creatures with wires. I mean, it was like an amusement park for a 19-year-old kid. Oh, and Phoebe Cates too. You got to be kidding me. So it was just the greatest experience you could ever have as a 19-year-old ever.
There are worse jobs to be had, yes. We have time for one final question. Oh, let's make it two. We've got one there and one here. Thank you, guys.
Hiya, I was
Hello.
just wondering, at the time you were making Gremlins, were you also aware that Ghostbusters was being made at the same time?
I was, and actually there's a funny story about this. It's a good story to end it on. So before I did Gremlins, I did this movie. Gremlins is actually my second movie. I did this movie called Nothing Lasts Forever. And it was a very odd, it is, I shouldn't say it was, it still exists. It's actually on YouTube. It was made by people who did a show in America called Saturday Night Live. And it had in it Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd doing cameos. And I actually am the lead in the movie. Like I said, you can see it on YouTube. It had all sorts of marketing and rights issues that take way too long to explain. Long story short, that movie never ever came out. Never came out in the theaters. Had some test screenings, never got released. It's like one of these great, lost movies that you hear about, but it's almost impossible to see. So I, as an 18-year-old, worked for about a week with Bill Murray and one day with Dan Aykroyd. So I knew them both. Not that well, but I was, on a reasonably decent basis with them. So I went to a school that still exists in New York City called Columbia University. And I'm going to my history class. Pay attention, sir. I'm answering your question. Yeah, that's right. I'm watching you, sir, who asked it. Anyway, so I'm just teasing you. I'm just playing. So I'm walking to my history class because I finished shooting Gremlins, and I'm on my way to classes because I'm a now 20-year-old kid. And I look, and on my campus, there's this hearse. It's all white, and it has this little ghost with a slash through it on the side. And I'm going, what is that? And I see these guys, they're dressed in these strange outfits with these large, looks like laser guns or something like that. And I'm going, what's going on here? And I see the police barricades. It says, do not cross on it. And people are like, yeah, they're shooting a movie. And I'm like, oh, cool. Who's in it? And they're like Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. And then two of the guys turn around, and I see it's Murray and Aykroyd. Now, I had just worked with them less than a year ago. So I'm surrounded by all my classmates and everything, and I'm behind the police barricade. And I go, hey, Bill, Danny, Bill, Danny, and I'm yelling at them. And Aykroyd has very good hearing. And he looks over and he goes, he nudges Murray with his elbow. He goes, it's the kid. And Bill Murray goes, what the heck? What the heck are you doing here? Come here. And so I go under the police barricade, and I go and I talk to them, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Oh, we're shooting a movie called Ghostbusters, and I'm sitting on the hearse talking to them and chatting with them at my college. It's like so random and coincidental. And Aykroyd's like, so you worked with Spielberg, wasn't he great? I was like, yeah, he's great, because Aykroyd had done Twilight Zone, the movie, for Spielberg. And I think he was in 1941, too, which is an early Spielberg movie. And so I chatted with them. And then the funniest part was, I was like, all right, guys, I looked at my watch, I got to go to class. And I turned around and I walked back towards the barricade, and I saw all my classmates, like hundreds of them pressed against the thing, and they're going like, what the heck? Like, how do you go and hang out with him? Because Gremlins hadn't come out yet, so they didn't know I was an actor. So like, I walked back, and as I walked back, it was like the parting of the Red Sea. And I go in under the barricade, and I sort of walked between the thing, and everybody's just looking at me going, how did he manage to do that? That was crazy. And so it was very funny. It was a good memory. And so, yeah, no, I knew that Ghostbusters was definitely happening. I just didn't know it was going to come out in America the same exact day, June 8th, 1984.
The same day.
Same day. And a lot of times at the same cinema. So if you couldn't get in to see Ghostbusters, you saw Gremlins. If you couldn't get in to see Gremlins, you saw Ghostbusters. Amazing.
I wish there was a photo or footage of you hanging out with them. That'd be like too much 80s nostalgia awesomeness. I don't think I could handle it. I don't think so. We're going to have to let Zach get back to the autograph and photo area. But please, any final words that you have for your fans here?
What's that?
Any final words for your fans?
Just remember, Gizmo loves you always. Always.
Hey, we love that. And thank you for the memories. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Zach Galligan.